everyone. Good afternoon and happy Wednesday. My name is Karen Dubin. I am the Chief Operating Officer for the Sweet Institute, and I have been reading with you Carl Rogers on Becoming a Person. And we had stopped on page 92 before, right before the 8th interview of Mrs. Oak, and we're going to continue there today. It's a very lengthy excerpt and a very lengthy dialogue, so we're going to go to about the middle of page 94 and pause there right before they speak at the same time, and then we'll continue from 94 onward on the next day, the next reading day. So here we go, and again we're at the top quarter of page 92, where it starts. It is in the 8th interview that Mrs. Oak rolls back the first layer of defense and discovers a bitterness and desire for revenge underneath. Over in this area of sexual disturbance, I have a feeling that I am beginning to discover that it's pretty bad. I'm finding out that I'm bitter, really, damn bitter. And I'm not turning it back into myself. I think what I probably feel is a certain element of, I've been cheated. Her voice is very tight and her throat chokes up. And I've covered up very nicely to the point of consciously not caring. But I'm sort of amazed to find that in this practice of, what shall I call it, a kind of sublimation, that right under it, again words, there's a kind of passive force. It's very passive, but at the same time, it's just kind of murderous. Therapist. So there's the feeling. I've really been cheated. I've covered that up and I seem not to care, and yet underneath that there's a kind of a latent but very present bitterness that is very, very strong. Client. It's very strong. I know it's terribly powerful. Therapist. Almost a dominating kind of force. Client. Of which I'm rarely conscious, almost never. Well, the only way I can describe it, it's a kind of murderous thing, but without violence. It's more like a feeling of wanting to get even. And of course, I won't pay back, but I'd like to. I really would like to. Up to this point, the usual explanation seems to fit perfectly. Mrs. Oak has been able to look beneath the socially controlled surface of her behavior and finds underneath a murderous feeling of hatred and a desire to get even. This is as far as she goes in exploring this particular feeling until considerably later in therapy. She picks up the theme in the 31st interview. She has had a hard time getting underway, feels emotionally blocked, and cannot get the feeling which is welling up in her. Back to a dialogue, starting with the client. I have the feeling it isn't guilt. Pause, she weeps. Of course, I can't verbalize it yet. Then with a rush of emotion, it's just being terribly hurt. Therapist. It isn't guilt except in the sense of being very much wounded somehow. Client weeping. It's, often I've been guilty of it myself, but in later years what I've heard parents say to their children, stop crying, I've had a feeling, a hurt, as though, well, why should they tell them to stop crying? They feel sorry for themselves, and who can feel more adequately sorry for himself than a child? Well, that's sort of what I mean, as though, I thought they should let him cry. And I feel sorry for him too, maybe, in a rather objective kind of way. Well, that's something of a kind of thing I've been experiencing. Now, just right now, and in therapist. That catches a little more the flavor of the feeling that's almost as if you're really weeping for yourself. Client. Yeah. And again, you see there's conflict. Our culture is that, one doesn't indulge in self-pity. But this isn't, I mean, I feel it doesn't quite have that connotation. It may have. Therapist. Sort of think that, sort of think that there is a cultural objection to feeling sorry about yourself. And yet, you feel the feeling you're experiencing isn't quite what the culture objected to either. And then, of course, I've come to see and to feel that over this, see, I've covered it up. And she weeps. But I've covered it up with so much bitterness, which in turn I had to cover up, weeping. That's what I want to get rid of. I almost don't care if I hurt. Therapist. Softly and with an empathic tenderness toward the hurt she is experiencing. You feel that here at the basis of it as you experience it is a feeling of real tears for yourself. But that you can't show, mustn't show, so it's been covered by bitterness that you don't like, that you'd like to be rid of. You almost feel rather absorbed, the hurt. You almost feel you'd rather absorb the hurt than to feel the bitterness. And what you seem to be saying quite strongly is, I do hurt, and I've tried to cover it up. Client. I didn't know it. Therapist. Like a new discovery, really. And end of reading for today. So we're going to continue on next time where it says client speaking at the same time, and continue on and see where it brings us. So thank you for tuning in and for reading with me, and I look forward to next time.